my name's Ellie Benson, and I did my senior research paper on how counterculture of the past 5 decades have evolved into future mainstreams. How I thought of my topic. Well, as previously stated, my topic is the evolution of past countercultures into future mainstreams. I focus mainly on pop culture trends such as fashion and music because that's what interested me the most. I've always been very interested in fashion, and I enjoy listening to music as a teenager. The topic came to me one day as I was talking with my sister about how our mom used to wear similar clothing to what we are wearing today. We included her in our topic of conversation, and she told us that some of the clothes that we were in love with today, she actually wore as a kid. But some other clothes that we wore today were weird when she was a kid. This led me to ponder about what other trends besides clothing trends have come and gone throughout history and how they have returned. So I began my research. I started with what I knew, what clothing trends had come and gone and come back again in history. As I started to research this, it led me to a lot of trends that were once unpopular, but as they came around the second time, they were wildly popular. Trends such as army jackets, combat boots, grunge, and many others were examples of this. The more research I did, the more I came across music and music festivals and how they were once part of the counterculture, but became part of the mainstream culture decades later. All my research led me to one final question. In the future, what is likely to be the next counterculture movement? Before we get started, I think it's important to really understand what I'm focusing in on. Counterculture in the mainstreams within pop culture. Counterculture can be defined as a group of people within a culture that separate themselves from a larger group of society due to different views, lifestyles, and beliefs or values. The mainstream is defined as the ideas of or activities that are regarded as normal or conventional, the dominant trend or opinion in fashion or fine arts. Lastly, pop culture can be defined as ideals of humor, charisma, mystery, or love. It includes popular music, fashion, art, etc. Trends of the past 5 decades can all be linked together using these terms. They all have been labeled as one of these, and in many in the future may continue or even switch labels. This leads me today that the counterculture of the past 5 decades has continuously evolved into mainstream trends in fashion and music through commercialization of counterculture trends. First, we can discuss music. Music is the first major example of how trends have transformed into the mainstream ideals of the future. A simple pattern is typically seen throughout history. Music begins as a part of the counterculture in one generation or decade, and within the next few it becomes mainstream pop hits, hitting the Billboard 100s. From the last 5 decades, one of the first examples of this is rock and roll. The music started to emerge in America and in the UK artists as rebellious genres embraced by the youth. For many years, the music was ridiculed by parents or older generations, but as these teens began to grow up, the music began to become part of the mainstream. Older generations who grew up with the music kept embracing it, and eventually it was considered a pop hit. Similar to this, the genre of rap and the artist Bob Dylan went from counterculture tunes to mainstream over time in a very similar manner. These evolutions in music are significant because it demonstrates how quickly voices of resistance become commercialized and sold to the mainstream. One of the main reasons why counterculture music becomes popular is because businesses discover that they can profit from these counterculture tunes. Although some have argued that the commercialization of counterculture is not really bad because consumers don't want meaning in their products. They just want a product that will sell. If that's what the consumer wants, fine, that's okay. The only crucial thing is that with all the commercialization, it's important to maintain the significance behind the counterculture because it expresses the critiques of mainstream culture that are necessary for growth. Next, we can discuss music festivals. This is the next transition of counterculture trends to pop sensations. Can be seen through this. Between Lollapalooza, Coachella, Bonnaroo, and more, music festivals are predicted to become as large, if not larger, than sport events today. A clear classic American mainstream event. The music festival culture has transformed in key ways, including who goes to the music, what music is playing, and why people are going to these. The transformation occurred in a way that would make festivals more popular among the mainstream and more easily commercialized. When music festivals first started, they were a part of counterculture movements. The first well-known example of this is Woodstock, which occurred in August of 1969. These hippies were a counterculture of the time that all came together for this music festival because their beliefs, and they wanted to distance themselves from the mainstream of society. Their ideals of the music festival that they created, though, would soon change. They disappeared from the evolving world for a while after Woodstock and a few other counterculture music festivals, but then reoccurred in the late 90s with Lollapalooza and Austin City Limits and Bonnaroo and Coachella. During this time, the scene became filled with many different faces for hundreds of different reasons. Now, this is a money-making business. Pop music festivals are made for the mainstream to come and socialize while listening to their favorite songs that they hear on the radio live. It's like a giant concert with many, many different artists. Yet, some like to argue that this has always been the case. People always came to music festivals to listen to their favorite music and just hang out with their friends. The argument is that the idea of the music festival remains the same, but it just led the majority to come to them rather than the minority. The commercialization of music festivals have not changed the inherent ideals that have always come with these events. Some even argue that music festival goers today are trying to get back into the swing of Woodstock counterculture vibes. Yet, this part isn't really true due to the fact that modern festivals no longer use this as a way for countercultures to celebrate the rejection of society, but rather they are a way for corporations to profit off of affluent kids who want to hear mainstream hits. Even though the original purpose of the festivals is kind of lost in history, the festivals themselves continue to thrive, and the commercialization of these festivals transform the counterculture movement into something that could be profitable among the mainstream. Lastly, we have fashion. In my paper, I discussed the last way the transition from counterculture to mainstream can be seen through the fashion industry. History shows how fashion trends can move from generation to generation by going from one generation's counterculture to the next generation's mainstream trend. Major fashion trends over the past 5 decades have almost all been repeated. But this likely isn't a shock to anyone because you're the ones wearing these trends, and it's likely that some of you may be even wearing them today. As time goes on, the fashion industry can be found that is easy to use older, edgy trends and reintroduce them to the public as something that can be enjoyed by the masses. This commercialization of counterculture styles takes away from the original motivation of the trend, but it provides something that appeals to a wider array of people. The counterculture fashion trends of the past are repackaged and sold to the mainstream in order to make a greater profit by the designers producing them. These trends are often reintroduced as socially acceptable a decade or two later. For example, the army jacket, a classic counterculture piece worn in the 60s to ironically represent the support of peace as a symbol against war. It was reintroduced once again as a statement piece, worn by masses of all ages, from young kids to moms. It's sold as a mainstream piece with an edgy twist. The same thing can be seen with combat boots, or the popular brand Doc Marten boots. These are both edgy pieces that were worn in the 90s by counterculture movements to show their support to the grunge movement, the counterculture movement led by the youths. but were later reintroduced as the 21st century as pieces that were grunge-inspired and should be embraced by the mainstream instead of countercultures. Celebrities are quick to wear these trends. Mainstreamers often follow celebrities to find out what these cool new trends are. Designers use these old counterculture trends as an inspiration and utilize celebrities such as Rihanna to sell these trends to the mainstream public. The idea that all fashion trends are repeated, the idea that all fashion trends are just old counterculture trends repeated makes it easy to predict what's going to hit the runway next. Sarah Mower, author from Vogue magazine, states that there's an algorithm that perfectly predicts these future trends. All you do is take today's date, subtract 25 years, which is the average age of these young designers who are reintroducing these trends, and there's your next trend. This algorithm states that designers that take trends that are barely remembered from when they were kids and trends that were not as popular, and they bring them to the mainstream as fresh new styles. This algorithm allows designers to utilize past trends in the best way possible as they transform them into style for the next mainstream. Some may argue that these trends are new, innovative, fresh, never before seen. But these people argue that these trends that hit the runway each year are not influenced by old trends, but instead completely new creations, which is kind of hard to believe. This is believed because these old trends aren't noticed and aren't taught to anyone. They aren't accounted in the history of fashion due to the fact that they're not mainstream fashion, so no one really cared about them at that time. Due to the fact that these counterculture trends were not popular at their original debut, designers are able to utilize them to create brand new ones that can be commercialized by the mainstream. So now it's pretty clearly evident that the past countercultures have evolved into future mainstreams. Knowing this, it allows us to predict what's going to come next for the countercultures and mainstreams of the future. Catherine K. Peterson from Scenario magazine wrote an article titled Countercultures of the Future. This article predicts that many upcoming counterculture movements of the future, from studying past subcultures of the norm, they can all be predicted for the future. First, we have a group called the Greed Busters. These are angered people who are angered at and try to disassociate themselves from the financial industry. Many more trends or counterculture of the future, such as those who may enhance life through technology and those who are strictly run the world with voluntary work, are expected to come along in the future. It's important that we're able to predict these new counterculture trends because they provide insight into what could be the mainstream in the future and what lies ahead for future generations. The question of how counterculture of the past 5 decades moved into the future mainstreams has now been answered through commercialization. Music festivals, fashion countercultures of the past 5 decades have all resurfaced as popular trends in the future throughout evolving time and trends. One of the most interesting parts of this transition is that people who are involved in the counterculture movement and kids, meaning that they create this counterculture, trends are technically creating mainstream of the future unknowingly. It's reasonable to infer from this data that youth counterculture movements of the past are the original source of mainstreams of today. Although this isn't really a bad situation, youth movements can be the ones held responsible for the backwards momentum of trends in fashion music industries. Rock and roll music fought against segregation, hippies fought against war and materialism, and the grunge movement challenged the ideas of conformity. The issue is that when the meaning behind these trends is lost, they're drowned out in order to make them appealing to the mainstream. Our society loses the ability to critique ourselves, and we learn from messages that the counterculture movements were trying to get across. While it's exciting that America has been able to bring these trends back, and it's important that the meaning behind these trends isn't lost, though. Due to the fact that it may be youth counterculture movements of today that inspire what will be the mainstream of the future, It's absolutely essential that we take a moment, look at them, record what's going on, and learn from them to enable a future that is not moving backwards like what we have right now. So, how did this all impact me? After I finished my paper and all my research, I was, to say the least, shocked. I couldn't believe America was letting such important aspects of our history be lost to commercializations, to the businessmen of the world. Just to commercialization. I now feel like it's my duty to pass this message on to others. We all must be aware of what is occurring and put an end to it. If we don't, we will be stuck in the same cycle of history and not be able to learn from our past mistakes of letting the meaning behind trends and youth movement beliefs not be a part of our history. The most important thing we can do is stay informed, pass the message on to others and to future generations. Don't let history escape us. Teach them the side of history that isn't being taught. Inform them on the counterculture trends, their values, and what they look like, and what they enjoy. And most importantly, teach them the dangers of commercializations and what it can do to society. Next, my community outreach. As cheesy as it sounds, throughout my whole project, I realized that the most important trend is the trend of giving. One that truly isn't going out of style anytime soon, which had an impact on me. For my community outreach program, I wanted to figure out a way to incorporate the trend of giving. I decided the best way for me to do this, while still holding the ideals of my paper, was to hold a clothing drive. Trends are always going in and out of style, and as we can clearly see, but there are over 15% of Americans who are living in poverty who can't even afford clothing, much less the mainstream bands that are currently hitting the runway. For me, a clothing drive is a great way to connect the ideas of my paper to my community. I've been in contact with the Baldwin Center in Pontiac, Michigan previously, and I knew they had a huge program for clothing drives. I thought this would be a good place to start. I called them and told them about my project, and they thought it was a great idea. The Baldwin Center is a program whose mission is to feed, clothe, educate, and empower men and women of all ages and children in the Pontiac community. These clothes will go to people of all ages in need of clothing for interviews, various weather conditions, or simply just need some clothes to put on their back. As I started to create this project, I had to decide where to conduct this drive, where I thought it would have most impact on people. I decided to place boxes off of various places that I had a connection with. I placed them at Seahome, Adat Shalom Synagogue in West Bloomfield, and Corton Elementary School, where I had gone to elementary school. The drive lasted 2 weeks, and I encouraged people from not only these locations, but all over to donate. I encouraged people to donate any clothes that were old or maybe they weren't wearing because they thought they weren't in style anymore. Here's the poster I made to donate. They were placed on the boxes and all over the locations where I donated them. So the project in motion, what I was actually doing with this. Once the project was in action, there wasn't really much I could do besides encourage people to donate, and of course donate myself. I made announcements and told my peers, but besides that, I had to let the project run its course. At Corton, where one of the boxes was, I asked my previous teachers there, who are now 5th grade teachers, I was asked by them to come and speak to the 5th grade class, on not only what this project was, but why it's really important to give back and get connected with my community. When I first got there, I introduced myself as well as my project and my paper, of course. I talked to them about what they could do to help me and how important their help was for this project, because without their help, this project was nothing. Lastly, I told them about the importance of doing community service and what it has done for me in the past few years and why I enjoy it. Now, this wasn't really initially what I had planned for my community outreach project, but I can honestly say that it was probably one of the best parts of it. And I'm so thankful I got this opportunity to do it. I can honestly say that it was one of the best parts of my project, and I feel like I've really connected with these kids and made it clear how important it is to get involved in the community and to give back. The next step was to retrieve my boxes 2 weeks later and go to the Baldwin Center. Picking up from Seafoam and Adopt Shalom, both the one boxes I placed were full, and I was really excited about it, but this was nothing compared to when I went to Corton. See, one of the 5th grade teachers emailed me the day before saying that they had a ton of boxes, but I didn't really understand what I was getting into. As I got there, they had their classroom full of so many boxes, I couldn't even fit them all in my car. I had to have someone come help me put them in their car as well. I was overwhelmed, to say the least. It was such an amazing feeling knowing that I was not only helping the Baldwin Center, but people who can't obtain clothes on their own, but I also helped 5th graders at Corton learn how amazing and important giving is. I thank them for their help so much, and honestly, this project would not have been a success without them. So the next day I went to the Baldwin Center. Somehow I fit all the boxes in my car this time with repackaging them, and I headed off. Once I reached the Baldwin Center clothes closet, the workers were overjoyed. They helped me unload my car, which took about half hour to unload because there were so many boxes. They were so thankful for my donation. They couldn't appreciate this enough. In the past, I've donated clothes before, but I never really got that hands-on experience of putting them into this clothing place and walking around the clothes closet and seeing people shopping and buying my clothes that I donated. It was truly an amazing experience, and I'm so thankful that I actually got to go to the Baldwin Center to see it happen. These are the 5th graders at Corton packaging the clothes. This was all of the boxes in my garage. Now, to wrap things up, looking back at this overall experience, I honestly would not change one part of it. Learning new things about trends and how they come about, or rather, how they come back around, and adapting it to a community outreach program truly changed my perspective on the subject. I learned that not only learning about history is crucial for what's to come in the future, but it's important to predict what's going to happen next from what's happening right now, such as how trends are always coming back around with, more importantly, who is starting these trends. I discovered that youth movements are the ones that start these trends, showing their huge impact on history that goes completely unnoticed. I also discovered that a trend forever a part of the mainstream is donating. There's so many people who don't care about what the mainstream or the counterculture trend is, what's hitting the runway, what's the main label, or the ideals behind it. They just merely need clothes to put on their back. I feel it's our duty as a community, if of course one is able, to give back and donate maybe your last year's trends to last year's mainstream trends to someone who may need them now. Thank you.